Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to let people trickle in. Give it 1 minute. I love the enthusiasm. Yeah, please put in the chat where you're from, what nonprofit you're with. Great. I think we have a lot of people trickling in. We'll just let it keep going. But before we start, I do want to let everyone know this WebEx call is being recorded and may be posted on DOE's website or used internally. If you do not wish to have your video recorded, your voice recorded, please do not speak during the call. If you do not wish to have your image recorded, please turn off your camera or participate by phone. If you speak during the call or use a video connection, you are presumed consent to recording and the use of your voice or image. Good news, those features should be disabled, so please post your questions in the chat and we can engage in the webinar. And now if I can kick it off to Gretchen to get us started.
So much, Annabelle. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our first webinar in our nonprofit webinar series that we're launching. So you're trailblazing with us. So appreciate you being here today. I'm Gretchen Gigley. I lead the Renew America's Nonprofits program at the Department of Energy. Today, you'll be hearing from a great panel of experts who will be sharing tools and resources available to nonprofits that are pursuing energy efficiency on the road to solar. Joining me today is Katie Hatcher from the Environmental Protection Agency, Sydney Applegate from the Department of Energy, and Dan Brissett from the Environmental and Energy Study Institute. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. So before we get started in diving into the how, we think it's important to talk a little bit about the why. This slide might be obvious to many of you, especially if you're working in the nonprofit sector currently, but we think it's important to note the critical role nonprofits play, not just in the communities they serve, but also in the workforce in the clean energy economy. Nonprofits employ more than 10% of the US workforce, which equates to about 12.4 million Americans and represents the third largest workforce in the economy. So it's huge. And that makes sense when you look at the number of nonprofits that are out there, approximately 1.5 million 501c3 nonprofits across America. And these nonprofits are serving diverse missions. So you all know this, but libraries, community centers, animal shelters, healthcare clinics, art institutes, food banks, and on and on. And the nonprofits serve a critical role in our communities, but you're also often asked to do more with less. So investing in energy efficiency in the building can generate both short and long-term energy savings, allowing operational dollars to be redirected into mission critical work. So you can do more in your communities, you can do more with in your mission by saving energy in your building. Next slide, please. So in the same spirit, in October, the U.S. Department of Energy announced 9 prime selectees for its Renew America's Nonprofit grant. This grant is the first of its kind investment by the Department of Energy to support energy efficiency in the nonprofit sector. So really exciting opportunity. It was a competitive grant made possible through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it's part of a $50 million Renew America's Nonprofit program. So this is a nonprofits helping nonprofits model where the 9 selectees will then sub-award grants to nearly 300 smaller community-based nonprofits, and they'll assist them in implementing energy efficiency upgrades in their buildings. So they can see energy cost savings through the efficiency projects, and then again be able to redirect those mission critical dollars into the community. This is a grant that's currently in negotiations, and we hope to see the awards in action sometime this summer. So stay tuned for some great stories around the work that these primes will be doing in communities across the country. And then as part of the nonprofit, the Renew America's Nonprofits program, we're also looking at other ways we can support the nonprofit community. So things like this webinar and a webinar series to provide tools and resources and let you know what's available to you now to help in this pursuit of energy efficiency and renewables. We also have a newsletter where we have curated funding opportunities in the federal government specifically for the nonprofit sector. And so if you haven't been receiving that and you're not part of our distribution list, definitely hop on our website and join so you can stay in touch. We'll be rolling out more technical services throughout 2024 and 2025. So definitely join the distribution list to keep up to date with those. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we'll continue on the why, answering the why question here. Next slide, please. So on the road to solar, it starts with efficiency, and so that's where we're starting with you today. By identifying, understanding, identifying, and prioritizing energy efficiency improvements in your building, down the road, you'll be able to right size your solar installation and making it a more efficient and effective building upgrade measure. So we're starting with efficiency because we really feel like that's where it starts. But we will be continuing down this road with you and providing additional webinars specifically around solar and other renewables in the future. Next slide, please, Ava. Okay, so one more why slide here before we get into the how. And we think it's really important to look at, you know, there are 500,000 facilities operated by nonprofits across the country. And if you think about, you know, up to 30% of energy possibly being wasted due to building inefficiencies, there's a huge opportunity here on so many levels for nonprofits. So by focusing on efficiency, as we've talked about, saving mission critical dollars, so that you can do more in your community. It also helps with organizational health and resiliency for the specifically for the nonprofit. And then beyond that, you're looking at creating a healthier building for your volunteers, your employees, and folks in the community that are coming in to utilize your services. You're also reducing pollution and emissions, which is critical. And again, as we talked about, this is a step on the road to solar. So you're looking at being able to right size your solar and putting renewables on an efficient building to make it more affordable. And then, lastly, the philanthropic community is really looking at climate investments. So this gives you an opportunity to possibly connect to new funders that are focused on this area. You'll have data, you'll have a story, you're on the path, and this opens up opportunities for funding. Okay, so I think we've dug into the why. Now let's talk about tools and resources available for how. I'm going to pass it off to Katie Hatcher to talk through benchmarking and the EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Katie?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here talking with all of you today and to tell you how Energy Star Portfolio Manager and other Energy Star tools and resources are available to you from the Environmental Protection Agency. I've been with the agency for a couple of decades, and some of the resources I'm going to talk about have been around for even longer than that. So they're very well tested and well utilized across the country. Next slide. As many of you may have seen, the Energy Star logo is our federal symbol for efficiency on products. It's also on homes and industrial plants, but some of you may not know that you can actually certify commercial buildings such as office buildings and more as Energy Star. Next slide. So the pathway to certification, and even if you don't end up certifying, is a tool called Energy Star Portfolio Manager. It's free and available for anyone to use. There's more than 300,000 buildings in it today that represent nearly 25% of floor space. We're super excited that it's been translated into French because we have an agreement with Canada, and then it's soon to be released in Spanish. There's hundreds of tools, that third-party tools that interact using our API with Energy Star Portfolio Manager, including utilities to provide data. The tool, even though it's a federally owned tool, has actually been adopted by many states and local governments that have benchmarking and a newer trend is building performance standard policies. Next slide. So why use Portfolio Manager? It's to benchmark your building against similar buildings nationwide, or if you have more than one building, benchmark your own portfolio of buildings. And if you have one building, you can benchmark any type of building in Portfolio Manager. You can benchmark it over time and set a baseline and measure your progress over time. You can't manage what you don't measure. Next slide. So the tool is more than an energy management tool for just energy, but I will end up focusing on energy a bit during this discussion. However, I do want you to know that in addition to tracking energy use and your renewable energy and your green power purchases, you can also track water use in the tool. And again, it's the gateway to applying for Energy Star certification if you have an eligible property. I'll mention that in order to achieve Energy Star certification, you have to meet indoor air quality industry standards. I'll talk more about that in a little bit later. The tool is full of lots of useful reports and output metrics. Next slide, please. You can see a few of them here. So the Energy Star score, talk more about that in a minute, but some basic metrics like weather normalized site energy use and source energy use intensity, water use intensity. We do have waste and materials tracking in the tool. So the tool itself can be used for broader sustainability, but our core user base is using it for energy management and then also reporting into other programs. It's been adopted by not only just state and local governments that have these benchmarking mandates, but a host of programs, such as loan programs, grant programs, et cetera, that are across the federal family of agencies providing resources out there. And it's also utilized in the process to demonstrate success or reductions for various incentives. Next slide. So what do you need to benchmark? Basic property information, including your property type, the gross square footage. The zip code is very important for weather normalization. Then based on the property type, there's a few use details if the property is going to be eligible for a 1 to 100 Energy Star score. If not, then some of those use details are optional, and you can calculate a basic energy use intensity. So then the important thing is that you have all the energy data for the property, and that is input monthly into the tool. So using your billing data from your electricity bill and your gas bill, et cetera. And then any bulk fuels that are used would go in as well. You would track your on-site renewable consumption and anything that's sold back to the grid. And you can also track green power purchases in the tool. Next slide. So in order to get started, if you have one building and you've got your utility bills handy, you can just go ahead and use that information to benchmark as the bill comes in each month. You can just plug it into Portfolio Manager. If you have data that's already in another tool, you've been tracking it in a spreadsheet, you can do easy uploads with that for single buildings or multiple meters or for lots of meters across a portfolio of buildings. We also, as I mentioned before, we have an API. So there's many tools that talk to Portfolio Manager, including data solutions that are implemented by a bunch of utilities across the country. So you can hopefully automate data in for your property from your utility. Next slide. So we have lookup tool. Within Portfolio Manager, you can also find this information, but on our website, we have a zip code based tool that allows you to look up to see whether your utility automates your energy data into Portfolio Manager through a simple authorization process that they've established with us. Next slide. So this is what Portfolio Manager looks like. It has a tabular structure, and the default is to see your portfolio of buildings and some summary information about them. You can, as you can see here, there's different ways to edit the views that you see. So if you want to pick different metrics from our hundreds of metrics available to show on this dashboard, then you can certainly do that. Right now, I'm representing the Energy Star score and a couple of basic metrics, site EUI and source EUI. And then you can see that there's a trend for your portfolio to show how you're doing based on a metric you select for that. It looks obvious, I hope, to show how you can then add a property. There's a little button right there that lets you add the next property. And then the tabular structure, it allows you to share your buildings with other Portfolio Manager users in a read-only or write access manner. This actually is helpful for facilitating reporting. A number of programs that have reporting requirements will accept the fact that a property is shared with that program's account in read-only as a method of sharing the data and progress to the program. There's other methods that are happening with other programs out there that I won't go into detail today about, but the reporting tab gives you the ability to pull together either stock reports or customized reports to use graphs and charts for internal management purposes, as well as just helping you make decisions about how you're progressing toward your energy efficiency goals. And then the recognition tab is the pathway that you would use to apply for Energy Star certification. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's so many metrics in Portfolio Manager, and that's why we have a robust custom reporting module, and you have the ability to customize what you see in your dashboard. But here I'm highlighting a few metrics here in terms of energy metrics, comparison metrics in terms of understanding your energy use intensity over time. We also have a comparison to the national median for properties that that are not eligible to earn the Energy Star score. And so that gives you the ability to compare your building to what the national median is of similar buildings nationwide. And then there's also the ability to enter cost information into Portfolio Manager to understand what your cost intensities are as well. And as I mentioned, there's renewable energy tracking, and so you can see results of how much, what the percentage of your electricity is coming from on-site renewables and much more. Next slide. Within the tool, there's also the ability for your building to set targets. You can set a target toward an Energy Star score, or you can set a target relative to the national median of your property, and then you can chart progress toward that target. And you could also establish a baseline and targets for water usage as well. We are in the process of significantly enhancing this goal tracking feature, so very excited about that. Next slide. You can understand cost information and create charts and graphs that they're ready to lift off the reporting module after you've benchmarked your buildings. Next slide. So in terms of tracking your energy bills and what's on your bills, understanding your demand charges is important as well. So the act of tracking your utility bills in a tool such as Portfolio Manager can help you spot errors in billing billing errors, and it also can help you understand what your demand charges are, and then understand how you might then change those to reduce those charges. Next slide. So the Energy Star 1 to 100 score is developed based on a random unbiased survey sample of buildings by space type. Typically, these data sources come from the Energy Information Administration's Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey, fondly called CBEX. And so these are updated every 4 or so years. And so what the scale means is that a property that scores between a 75 to 100 is kind of top in class. It's in the most efficient quartile across the country of its similar property type. It's 75% more efficient than other similar buildings. And so these properties are eligible to earn the Energy Star, which then can be put on the outside of the building to demonstrate its energy efficiency. And in doing so, the data for the application needs to be reviewed by a licensed professional per our guidance and demonstrate that they meet a minimum of ASHRAE 62.1 and 55 for thermal comfort and ventilation. And there's also an illumination requirement. So the important thing here is that you can increase the energy efficiency of the building, but you need to be able to meet the basic standards in order to make sure that the building is healthy to occupy. Next slide. These are the property types that are eligible to earn the Energy Star. Office buildings, and you could just see the list of them here. And what I would like to mention is that if your property doesn't meet our definition specifically of one of these that's eligible for a 1 to 100 score, that's okay, because you can still benchmark the building and use that national median and other metrics that we provide to understand your performance. And then, of course, you can track your performance over time. Next slide. There's plenty of recognition pathways. An example of the Energy Star decal that would go on the outside of a building is on the left side of the screen. It has a date stamp on it, so you know how fresh it is, if you will. And then it also comes with how many years that building has been certified. You can design a building to earn the Energy Star, and then we have other recognition opportunities, such as our Energy Star tenant space recognition. Next. And we have many tools and resources that can help you along your journey, including our treasure hunt maps, a buildings emissions calculator, cash flow opportunity calculator. I'm not going to take the time to go into what each of these do, but they basically help you understand what your opportunity is to save energy and money in your building. Buildings that have been working with the Energy Star program for years are saving anywhere between 10 and 60% in terms of energy, and then that translates into cost savings. We also have an Energy Star product rebate finder that I encourage you to check out. And then, so the message is benchmark in Portfolio Manager. If you need help, we have online training and support. And then track your progress over time, set a target to try to achieve your goals, and then watch your results happen as you make improvements. Next slide. And so please contact our help desk. We have lots of self-help things, but we also, you can ask a question and then we'll help you answer your question. Next slide. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and we'll now toss it over to Sydney next.
Thanks, Annabelle.
All right. Hi, everyone. So transitioning from benchmarking a building to what can you do in your building or buildings to save energy? That's where Better comes into the picture here. Preparing buildings for energy efficiency retrofits traditionally requires expensive on-site energy audits or time-intensive simulation tools. As a result, a majority of buildings fail to pursue cost-saving retrofits, which we are here to solve today. To address these barriers, we at DOE have introduced Better, the building efficiency targeting tool for energy retrofits, which is a newer free online tool that enables building operators to quickly and easily identify the most cost-saving energy efficiency measures in buildings and portfolios of buildings using readily available building and energy data. Better utilizes an open source data-driven analytical engine and user-friendly web interface to automatically analyze a building's monthly energy use in response to weather conditions using ASHRAE inverse modeling. Better focuses on no to low cost operational energy efficiency measures to cut energy use by 5 to 10% portfolio-wide and can identify buildings ready to achieve net zero energy. Next slide. So since Better was released about 3 years ago, we now have over 10,000 buildings who have used or are using Better across 17 different sectors. I think these testimonials here, especially the one on the right, really speaks to our goal when working with the nonprofit sector in particular. I'll also drop a link in the chat afterwards for our newly released case study with Power Options, which is a nonprofit energy consortium based in Massachusetts, and their use of Better. All right, next slide. I will be giving a demo of Better in a few minutes here. It's very exciting, but I'm just going to quickly go over how it works first. So 3 core tenets here: simple inputs, fast analysis, and actionable portfolio and building level insights. Next slide. So you have utility bills, location, and building size, and property type information. So with those 4 categories, next slide. The tool benchmarks a building's electric and fossil energy use against its peers, comparing those results to the average performance based on building type and location. It generates a change point model, which is the graph you can see in the middle here, which is a piecewise linear regression, using recorded monthly utility data and NOAA weather data. Next slide. To quantify energy, cost, and greenhouse gas reduction potentials at the building and portfolio level, and recommends energy efficiency measures to decarbonize and electrify buildings and portfolios. Next slide. So here is a building level downloadable report, an example that I will again show during the demo, but wanted folks to be able to share this visual with others after the webinar as well, if they would like to do that. All right, screen sharing time. Okay, Annabelle, can I make sure that you see the right screen? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to double check. All right, so this is a Better homepage. As I mentioned, is a website-based platform, so very easy to access at our link. The homepage just has some basic information and some links over at the top here around the countries and languages Better is available in. From here, you're going to go ahead and just click the Get Started button. If you were a new user, it would ask you to enter an email and password, but I am already logged in. So this is my dashboard of the few portfolio runs that I've already done. And if I was a new user, I would just navigate here to create new portfolio. There are 3 options to running a Better analysis. There are 3 types of ways to input information from scratch, which is specific fields that you would just go through and manually enter. The Better template, which is going to be those same fields, but you are able to upload an Excel spreadsheet to be able to do it for more than one property. Faster option than from scratch. And then the Portfolio Manager option here. So if you're already benchmarking your building in Portfolio Manager, or are now going to because of Katie's lovely presentation, this is definitely the fastest and best way to get your data into Better in order to generate that analysis. For today, I am just going to select the Better template since I have that available. I would just go here, oops, open, and select upload. From there, it takes about 5 seconds per property. This data set is 32 buildings, so it would take us about 2 minutes. So for the sake of this demo, I've already created a portfolio. So going back to the dashboard, this is the test 2. All of this data that you're seeing on the screen and future screens is test or dummy data, so no issues with privacy. It is also multifamily data, which might not be applicable for some folks, but really just, again, this is tested data, so it doesn't really matter in the context of this demo. Yeah, so you can see the buildings that are uploaded here, and you would just navigate to the analytics tab, and from here you open up the analysis that's been run. Okay, so this is the portfolio level report for Better. As you can see, we have 32 buildings here, and some high level statistics about the potential for energy savings, cost savings, and greenhouse gas emission reduction potential at the across your entire portfolio. We also have some nice drop downs going into a bit more detail if you would like to dive into your data a little bit more. Like I mentioned, these files are also downloadable, which is great, able to share with other folks who potentially haven't logged into the tool. Second bucket of things to point out here are the top energy efficiency measures. So again, this is dummy data, so this would probably not be the case for your portfolio. But for the top 3 recommendations here, reduce plug loads, lighting loads, and equipment schedules, those measures apply to all 32 of the properties. The other 2 categories here apply to 29 and 19 of the 32 properties, respectively. And from here, you can actually navigate directly to the properties, or I guess we can go here, directly to the properties that these measures apply to. So nice, easy navigation, as well as a very high level description of what these different energy efficiency measures mean. So really trying to cater to folks who haven't as much background in the building science or building upgrade process. Each of these also have some general resources as well as specific actions. So really trying to move from kind of a general category to add shading device. Okay, how am I going to add a shading device? Here are the links that are going to tell me how to do that. And so at the portfolio level, and this is the portfolio level view that we have going on right now, this is a lovely plot where you can look at all the buildings that you've uploaded across your portfolio and compare them. So we're able to see which buildings have, cost savings are the green bar, electricity EUI is the blue, and fossil fuel EUI on top of that is the orange. So from here, we're able to identify which buildings are good candidates for operation and maintenance tune-ups due to being in the mid-range of energy and financial performance. So maybe folks around here. Which buildings are already high performers and for which design, technology, and operational best practices can be shared across the portfolio. So let's see which one has. So this one's a pretty low energy use intensity, but has lower cost savings. So I would probably want to look for one that maybe in this category over here that has a lower energy use intensity and also high potential for cost savings. So yeah, those are the 2 first categories. And then the third category to look for when you're looking across the portfolio are going to be those buildings that you really would like to bring down their energy use intensity. So these high energy users and high cost saving opportunities, which would require or recommend audits or full scale audits or capital investments due to high energy and cost savings potential. So that same information is again down here in a table for folks who would like to filter around on a table format. And from here, can then access the specific buildings. So I'm just going to go click into building 29. In building 29, we have a similar set of information around here at the top, really those high level stats. And information about the energy in this specific building, some nice charts and graphs. And here's where it differentiates from the portfolio level analysis. You still have the energy efficiency recommendations. High level, we'll have more below on those. But here on the left, you're going to see the type of analysis that's been run specifically on this building. So in Better, there's 2 ways to do analysis. Like I mentioned earlier, how Better works is it's benchmarking or comparing your building against its peers. So you can analyze, or Better runs 2 types of analysis based on the type of peer group that you are going to set. So for a few building types, we have national peer groups that we have worked on to make sure that the bell curve is nationally representative. nationally representative for K-12 schools, multifamily, and offices. We're also adding libraries here pretty soon, and we're going to continue to build out additional property types, especially ones that are community serving institutions. For buildings that are not those, you can still run better. What would be considered the peer group would be an upload of 30 or more properties. So if you're a recreation center and you would like to use better, you would just upload 30 more recreation centers, and those buildings would be compared against each other as their peers. So those are the two types of analysis. And then within those types of analysis, you're able to set different targets. So if you would like all of your buildings to at least be meeting the average energy performance for that peer group, you would want to select nominal. If you would like a really aggressive target, you're able to select aggressive or conservative as well. So from there, we also have some cost information as well as cost savings breakdown. This is really where we're going to start getting into like the minutia of what areas and opportunities there are for energy improvements. Baseload and cooling electricity, specifically in this building, where the main opportunities lie. Okay, weather sensitivity and benchmarking, bringing in these new terms for a second, baseload and cooling sensitivity. Baseload means that the energy use is not related to the outdoor air temperature, so this would apply to things like lighting and plug loads. If there are high levels compared to their peers of lighting and plug loads, Better would recommend, and in this circumstance is recommending, that the building focus on those areas for opportunities for improvement. And then cooling and heating sensitivity would be around the efficiency of the heating and cooling systems in those buildings, which are represented by the graphs and also the kind of easier to read scale of how well or poor is the building doing compared to its peer group for baseload, cooling, heating, slope, or change point. So in this case, this building is only better than 27% of its peers for cooling efficiency. Yeah, so this is just a little bit more information, as well as, again, resources about the different measures that have been recommended for this specific property. I think the only thing I wanted to leave you all with is that today I was really going over kind of the basics of Better. Like I mentioned, we are continuing to build out Better with additional property types at the national reference statistic level. Better also recently added a PV watts connection, which is a solar tool that I think will be mentioned at some point in the future. If not, happy to talk about it separately. But that also helps identify additional savings potentials on top of your traditional energy efficiency measure recommendations that I've been talking about today. All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Sydney, thank you so much for that demo. I feel like those are always more helpful sometimes than seeing slides. You can really see all the potential uses of the tool. And now, did my slides share all right? With thumbs up. Great. Now I will hand it over to Dan to talk more about financing and ideas for getting started.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Annabelle and Gretchen, for the opportunity, and Katie and Sydney for being co-panelists. Nice to see you all. I'm going to move through my slides pretty quickly. I know there's tons of great questions in the chat, so I'll try to move swiftly through these. Annabelle, I do have a couple animations, so I'm going to keep track of where we're going. But this first slide, Gretchen talked about this, but I have to say it too. Energy efficiency is always a good thing. When we're starting these kinds of conversations, the multiple reasons to do energy efficiency is that it delivers multiple benefits. And for the purposes of today, one thing we'll focus a little bit more on is that second one from the bottom, which is it increases your readiness for renewable energy, battery storage, electric vehicle, other types of clean energy that you might want to invest in. In other words, the more you invest in energy efficiency, the less you have to spend on solar and other technologies like that. And that means the more good stuff, the more money you have to spend on the good stuff that your organization is set up to do, right? I run a nonprofit. None of our nonprofits are set up to waste energy, right? We're set up to serve our communities. And so it's really important that we find as many resources, in fact, to be able to do that. So we'll move to the next slide. And this one will have a couple animations. This is just a recap. But if Annabelle clicks again, you'll hear a lot when you're talking about energy efficiency and making investments. You'll hear a lot about simple payback. And that's fine. It's an intuitive thing, but unfortunately, simple payback is really a pathway to making some suboptimal decisions. For one, it's arbitrary. Why is a simple payback of one number any better or worse than another number? Your organization's different. You have different priorities. But it also ignores the benefits that will accrue after the payback period has ended. And so what I would like everyone to think a little bit about for purposes of today is to think instead about return on investment. There's a couple advantages to that. For one, it focuses you and focuses your attention on what you'll be getting back after you make the investment. You won't be focusing as much on when you'll be able to recover the outlays. And that will encourage some longer term thinking. And also, if you're really attracted to something like, say, solar energy, focusing on your return on investment is a great way to also incorporate the savings that you'll realize from energy efficiency investments before you get to actually putting solar panels on your roofs. We'll go to the next panel. And so the key word for all of this, and shout out to Pee-wee, the key word to all of this is, if Annabelle clicks, leverage, right? So leverage is the idea of pulling together as many financial and non-financial resources as possible, making the most of each one, because we're talking about comprehensive projects here. And you just saw two tremendous presentations from Katie and Sydney about some really powerful non-financial incentives. You should not overlook those, because those tools, those benchmarking tools, those energy savings tracking tools, they will absolutely help you scope out your project, plan investments, stage or stagger those investments, and also think about opportunities so that when you're going out and finding grants, rebates, other financial incentives, you'll know exactly where to look and you'll be able to pull them all together. And so this next slide, Annabelle, you can just kind of click through. These are some examples of where you can find sources of leverage. So there are some obviously financial sources of leverage like grants, like Renew America's Nonprofits grants for those organizations that are participating in this first round of the program, but also utility rebates. Your nonprofit may be located in a place where your local utility makes rebates available for lighting or heating and cooling equipment, or even cooking equipment or vending equipment, things like that. Your organization may have some cash or reserves, or the ability to save up some cash and reserves. And then, of course, there's financing. We'll talk about that more in a moment. And then the direct pay. And we'll talk about that in a moment too. And that is, my guess is, a lot of reasons, a big reason why so many people are interested in this topic, because it's so exciting. The ability to monetize tax credits previously unavailable to tax exempt organizations is a true game changer. But it would be a real shame if you didn't do energy efficiency first. And then, of course, there's the non-financial incentives. Qualified contractors, a tremendous source of information, and also a community of people who can help you pull those projects together. And then Energy Star and Better, and those are really, really important. So for this, as we're thinking about how to pull together these financial resources, Annabelle, if she clicks again, there'll be another little bit that pops up. And this is just a reminder that if you're thinking about pulling all these together, return on investment will really help you focus on lowering those costs. Not only is total cost part of the numerator, it's also the denominator. And so the lower you get those costs, the better. And pulling all of these resources together, can really help you do that. Another important thing here that I would like everyone to take away as we move through these is that the less you have to finance, the better. Financing is an option. Maybe it comes from a bank, or maybe it comes from another institution, or maybe we could think of, there's lots of places that finance could come from, but you'll be better off if you're able to minimize the amount that's financed. That means focusing on reducing the upfront costs. So things like grants, rebates, cash and reserves, and eventually the tax credits. But it also gives you flexibility, because if you're financing a smaller amount, that gives you a lot more flexibility later on down the line about how to repay it. And that flexibility is really, really valuable, even though it maybe doesn't have as much sort of immediate monetary value. Having that flexibility later on will really come in very handy. So speaking of financing, this next slide is just a quick overview of some resources that you may have in your communities. And financing is really part of the equation. The first thing you'll want to do is think about lowering those upfront costs through things like grants and rebates. Calling your utility is often a really great place to start, and some folks are putting some good suggestions in the chat as well. And then researching your financing options. So depending on where you live, you may have financing made available by your state and local government, perhaps a green bank, perhaps a utility, or other types of institutions. These are just a couple quick summaries of explainers of potential sources for financing. So if your utility has on-bill financing, they may extend to you the financing and then allow you to repay it over time through your utility bill. And those repayments are generally aligned so that the repayment in any given month is less than the savings in any given month, which is a really great benefit. Green banks are sometimes public, sometimes quasi-public, sometimes nonprofit financial institutions set up specifically to focus on underserved borrowers. A lot of green banks are popping up all over the country, in part because they're being encouraged to, because of incentives through the Inflation Reduction Act, like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and Solar for All. So green banks are popping up, and depending on where you live, they might also be focused specifically on underserved areas, so rural areas or disadvantaged communities as well. Property assess clean energy, again, depending on where you live, could be an option. And community development financial institutions are mission-driven, and credit unions are mission-driven financing entities that may be able to offer with low-interest loan products that are, again, quite flexible. I keep saying available in your area. Well, how can you tell? Well, thankfully, DOE has a really great resource. And if Annabelle clicks a couple more times, this will pop up at the back. This is the Financing Navigator. This is a really, really great resource to help orient yourself to all of the different financing options that may be out there. And if you know what you're looking for, you'll be able to talk with your peers, which is that third bullet. Discussing lessons learned, how different financing options can fit together with grants and rebates, how the non-financial technical assistance or sources of leverage can fit together. There's some really, really great lessons learned out there. Even if your nonprofit might be a little new to this, I guarantee there are lots of nonprofits that have done it before. And I know that because our organization, EESI, has actually documented many of those case studies, and I have a whole bunch of links coming up in a couple slides. So the last thing I think to talk about really quickly before we wrap up is on the next slide, and that is direct pay. Direct pay opens up the world of tax credits previously available only to taxable entities. So nonprofits now have the ability to go to the IRS, submit the proper paperwork, and actually get a direct pay. So a cash payment from the Treasury in lieu of a tax credit, because nonprofits don't have tax liability. This is really, really attractive for renewable energy projects like rooftop solar, even community solar, geothermal, but also energy efficiency improvements like heat pumps and electrification technologies like battery storage. And depending on where you are, if you're in what's called an energy community, you can actually get an up to 10 percentage point bonus when you're doing this. So direct pay is new. There's a lot of work left to be done on the part of nonprofits, but also organizations helping nonprofits access this new resource to really figure it out. But this is a game changer. And if your organization has been waiting for the right moment to if you're enticed by solar, if you're waiting for the right moment to make that investment, you're getting very close to that time. But before you take that plunge, really do encourage you to think through all of your options for energy efficiency so that you're really minimizing your overall costs and you're able to minimize how much you'll finance, and you can make those direct payments from the Treasury go even further. The last slide, I think, is just a bunch of links. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. The next slide is my contact information and also the contact information for my colleague, Miguel Yanez Barnuevo. So Annabelle and Gretchen, thanks so much for the opportunity to present. I'll wrap it up there, and if there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. We are hoping to save at least 5 minutes for questions. So I'm going to go through my slides quickly. A little bit more. We will send the slides out afterwards. Everyone will have all this information, and that is why we wanted to, of course, include a resources slide. So hopefully you take away from this webinar is that there are many actionable next steps you can take if you're thinking about efficiency, solar, leading to direct pay. And so those are all linked here, in addition to some solar resources. And we did want to promote that if you sign up for our email list, we are announcing soon our next webinar, which will have some more solar specific resources. And if you have any questions throughout, the email nonprofits@doe.gov does get to us to answer. And finally, coming soon, Renew America's Nonprofits is busy providing lots of resources and thinking up interesting things we can provide And so we urge you not to miss our next webinar. Unfortunately, if you sign up for this webinar, it does not automatically subscribe you to our newsletter. So fortunate or unfortunate, but we do invite you to sign up. We send out updates almost just once a month with funding opportunities specifically for nonprofits, as well as webinars and upcoming events. And we want to hear from you. So we're opening up a form. Please give us your ideas and let us know what your needs are so we can inform this kind of content and others and really make sure we're addressing your needs. And to that point, I want to save the next 10 minutes for any questions. I'm going to stop screen sharing so we can look at the chat. And I see the link for the newsletter. We will put that in the chat box. And then Gretchen, do you see any questions you want to flag right away, or any of the speakers? I know there were some great questions following the demo.
Yeah, I guess I'll start because I think there's a handful of questions specifically about Renew America's nonprofits and the grant. And when we showed the map there, there were, there's a handful of states that are grayed out that don't have primes serving those regions. And so, I'll say that we're really focused on looking at tools and resources that we can provide to those states that aren't going to be served and to the nonprofits that aren't going to be served. And so that's where your feedback really is important. Annabelle mentioned the form. If you could give us feedback, and then, I think it's a really exciting time. And I think Dan alluded to this too, that there's so much available to the nonprofit sector right now in the federal government and in the philanthropic community. And so we're really focused on connecting y'all to those tools and resources that are existing right now. And so that's really our next step. We do hope to get additional funding to be able to continue offering additional grants for Renew America's nonprofits, but we're laser focused on the needs and connectivity of existing funding right now within the federal government. So I hope that helps, and definitely nonprofits@doe.gov. You can email us specific questions about Renew America's nonprofits if you have those. But we just are so grateful that you guys are here today and want to hear from you. And so then let's hear, we can go through.
I think one recurring question is about
If Annabelle, you flagged, yeah.
how to benchmark a building that has multiple meters, or if there are multiple buildings with 1 meter. So I guess Sydney or Katie, do you have a response for that?
Sure. I think I saw that question in the chat, actually, as it related to Portfolio Manager and then as it relates to Better. So I'll answer about Portfolio Manager. If you have a campus of buildings that has a master meter, you can enter that property into Portfolio Manager according to its primary space type. And then if you end up sub-metering later on, you can break out the buildings and track consumption at the building level. So essentially you can kind of do both. Sydney, if you want to answer for Better.
Sure. I think that for the most part, Portfolio Manager holds most of the complexity around sub-metering versus campus level metering. We also translate that over to Better. I will say that I think the one thing related to kind of aggregation of energy use is that whole building energy use is required for Better. So specifically in the multifamily sector, that is a requirement of using Better. So not just tenant or common space only.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, there's also a question, just to repeat the stat you said, buildings using Energy Star can save between 10 and I believe I heard 60%. Is that true? You can save?
Yeah, actually, some of them have saved 60. I mean, we have over 300,000 buildings that are tracking energy in Portfolio Manager. And so, what we do occasionally is we go through and take a look at some of their savings trends. And we've also held competitions over time where we've challenged folks to save over a baseline, and we've tracked progress at 10, 20, 30, and up to 60% increments. And that's actually a really fun thing to do. We have adaptable competition resources to help you do that for your own building over time, or through a whole portfolio or a whole program.
And to that extent, someone asked what the cost is to become energy certified, which is a great question. Hopefully everyone's interested in doing that.
Yeah, so there's no cost to the federal government. We don't charge for Energy Star certification. If your organization happens to have a licensed professional available, already for other work that you're doing, it could be just woven into that. If you have to outsource that, then it may cost you a few thousand to do it. So it's anywhere from sort of free or could be combined into what you're already working on.
Could jump in with a quick answer to the next question that looks like just came in the chat, but there's also a lot of questions. So I don't know if folks were tracking the previous ones.
Yeah, go ahead.
Someone was just asking to what does plug load refer? Thank you for calling that out. Plug load is specifically like computers and things that would be attached to outlets in a building. So a specific action related to plug load reduction would be automatic shutdown or sleep mode for computers.
Asking about 179D. We didn't discuss that today. That'll probably be part of our next webinar, but I don't know if Dan, you have anything specifically to say about that, about 179D.
Yeah, so the Inflation Reduction Act extended and improved 3 energy efficiency tax credits, 25C, which is for existing homes, 45L, which is for new homes, and 179D, which is for existing buildings, commercial buildings. And 179D now provides between $2.50 or $5 per square foot. And it's a deduction, so it's not a credit, which is an important distinction there as well, for energy efficiency for buildings. So it is on the table. I'm not sure how accessible. I'm not sure it will be as accessible as some of the other tax credits that are out there, but a lot of groups, including the U.S. Green Building Council and other groups, are looking at ways to really help organizations come up to speed very quickly. 179D has traditionally been used most extensively in like the large commercial building, like office buildings, where you're doing large, roof replacements and big lighting retrofits and things like that. For smaller nonprofits, I think there could be a scaling issue that people will have to figure out. But yes, it was absolutely extended as part of the IRA.
Here's more of a technical one. If we have multiple campus buildings all on 1 meter, do we consider that one building? I think this would go to, Sydney or Katie. Yeah.
It depends on the property type. So there's 5 property categories that are benchmarked as a campus in Portfolio Manager: K-12 schools, multifamily, hospitals, hotel, and senior care. And so if it's one of those, then you would benchmark what seems like it's the complex. And if there's 2 on a really giant parcel, you would want to try to figure out how they actually are their own entities. But if they are master metered all together, which can tend to be at the university level, really, then you would put them all into Portfolio Manager as one. And if you're dealing with estimation of data, you're really not actually getting much results from your benchmarking exercise, right? You have to match the total square footage with the energy consumption.
I recognize we're almost at time. I'm going to shout out one question that made it into the Q&A feature. Katie, does Energy Star offer any climate risk assessments?
I think climate risk assessments in terms of like resilience of assessments would be maybe more through FEMA.
Yeah, I know there's a tool through FEMA. I can try to find it and put it into the chat. If I could use the mic for a second too. I know there was a question like way kind of far back around audits, and seems like they were asking about if audits should be required for all buildings. I think I just wanted to specifically underscore that yes, some especially high energy user buildings should probably go through an energy audit. First, you should prioritize to determine which of those buildings you should use the money on to get the audit. And second, all buildings can also be, almost all buildings can be improved through operational low to no cost opportunities in buildings as well. So definitely suggest exploring those, especially for more of the mid-range energy users.
Amazing. Well, another big thank you to all of our speakers for these demos and these resources, which I'll just keep repeating. We will share the slides with everyone, and we will have the webinar recording posted as soon as possible, but I encourage you to look at the slides. Webinar recordings may take a little while to get all uploaded. And again, our email is nonprofits@doe.gov. Feel free to reach out, and thank you all so much for spending the last hour of your Tuesday with us if you're on the East Coast or anywhere else. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.